Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Paul Jarvis. He's the co-founder of Fathom Analytics, an amazing company which is actually supporting privacy of our digital data. He wrote the book called The Company of One, which is why I wanted to have him on the show. And we'll be speaking about how and why to question growth, as well as what is enough and how to define it, and why every business is a lifestyle business, according to him. Very interesting conversation. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. I'm Eric Rozenberg, and today I am absolutely excited to speak with Paul Jarvis. First of all, I read his book, Company of One, and I thought every page I was reading, it was like, oh my God. And at the end of each chapter is, why don't you start thinking about something? Paul is an author, writer, designer. He's been working with major sport people like Shaquille O'Neal. He's been working with a major company like Microsoft and Mercedes-Benz. And what I really like is that he's been 20 years an entrepreneur. He's on his own. He loved the Company of One. He's advocating for it. And he has a lot to share with us. So, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Eric. I appreciate it.
It's I'm reading your newsletter every week, almost every week when I can. But I have different elements in there where you basically, what I can say, you telling it like it is. You sharing your story. And as we were saying just a little bit before starting to record this, you're really the advocate of why not growing. Because everybody said, you need to grow. We had Vern Arnish on the podcast before. I love Vern. I love everything he's doing and all the content he's producing. And it is not necessarily for everybody. So how and why to question growth?
Yeah, so I think growth definitely makes sense sometimes, right? And I'm not an advocate for not growing. I'm an advocate for thinking first, does this growth make sense? Does this growth make sense for me, the founder of the company, for the employees, for the customers, and for long-term success of everybody involved? And I think Edward Abbey said it best in 1978, that growth for growth's sake is the ideology of a cancer cell. So we can't get wrapped up in just assuming that growth is always good, always beneficial, always something that we need. It certainly is. Even for companies that are about the size that I like to run and start, you need growth in the beginning. Otherwise, it's not a business. It's an idea that you have. Unless you get customers, you get revenue, you get things happening, growth absolutely has to happen at the start because you need to go from zero to something. And what the book and the thesis of the book sort of argue is that there comes a point where growth might not make sense. And I think this is difficult for a lot of business owners because, like I said, in the beginning of all of our businesses, we need growth, and growth is good and growth is beneficial. But there comes a point where it might not make sense to grow. For myself, I don't want to have a huge company. I don't want to promote myself out of a job I like doing, which is writing and designing, into the job of managing people, which I know I'm not very good at. So I don't want to grow in that way, and that doesn't make sense. But obviously, it's good if revenue grows. I'm not anti-capitalist. I like making money. I like that I run businesses that are profitable. But there's certain places where it doesn't make sense to grow more, because then that would be more work, more responsibility, more people. And that to me doesn't make sense. So I'm always looking for the way to be the most efficient in the smallest scale possible and see where I can increase revenue without increasing expenses or without increasing personnel, or do it in a way that is better for the long-term sustained future, where I'm not doing things like spending now in the hopes that profit will reach my expenses in the future.
Right. So, yeah, absolutely. And that, I think, resonates a lot with all my friends in the meetings and event industry, especially all the people that have or a company of one or a small company, and they're not necessarily or looking at growing. But I think that especially when they read your book, there's a lot of great question about what people say balance. I don't think it's balance, integration between personal and professional life. And to your point, my friends in EO, an entrepreneurs organization, some of them always speaking, how are you doing? Oh, great. I hire X number of people and my revenue grow and I'm in Inc. 5000 and I won 300 spot. And I'm thinking, well, I'm happy for you. But at the end of the day, do you make more profit and are you more happy? So according to you, what is enough? And how would you define what is enough? And people listening, how should they think about what is enough for them?
Yeah, and it's actually funny that you brought up the Inc. 5000. There was a study done on the Inc. 5000, and they found that 5 to 8 years later, almost 70% of those businesses had gone out of business. So It's good to be on the list, but you need to be able to sustain that profitability. You need to be able to sustain the growth that you have to get on lists like that. So I think that's important. To your question, it's a lot of it comes down to, I guess, kind of ego, right? Because it sounds good if somebody asks you, "Oh, what do you do?" and you say, "I'm an entrepreneur," and they ask, "Well, how big is the business?" It sounds good to say, "Oh, I have 1,000 people across 28 offices in 13 countries." That sounds good. If I answer the question honestly, I work by myself with one co-founder, and this is a room in my house. This is just a spare bedroom. That's my office. It's been my office for 20 years. So that doesn't sound as good. But at the end of the day, I have to think, well, am I running my business to look good for other people? Or am I running my business in a way that makes me feel happy and satisfied, right? And as far as what is enough, there is no one answer. And I think that's what's important. And it's funny that you brought up the questions at the back of every chapter in the book. My publisher said, "Paul, you should have directives after each chapter. Tell people what to do." And I said, that's a good idea, but it's impossible. Because a lot of the things that I talk about in the book, there is no one size fits all for that. My own enough is very different than yours, or very different than one of my friends has 5 kids. His enough is far larger than mine. I have no children. And so his enough is 7 mouths to feed, a house big, and a mortgage that supports a house big enough to house 7 people plus all their animals. So I think enough really comes down to figuring out where growth makes sense. So does this growth make sense for myself, for the business sustainability, and for the customers? And thinking as well, like, does more here equal better? Because sometimes it does. Like I said, sometimes growth absolutely makes sense. Sometimes it's too painful for a business not to grow. But other times it's just a matter of, well, maybe I don't need this, or maybe there's a different way to solve this problem. Because solving a problem by adding more is typically the easiest solution in business. You can solve anything easier with more, but it's not always the best solution or the best long-term solution.
Absolutely. And to what you say about the chapter, that begin to think about every time you have that at the end of the chapter, I really like it. And I cannot agree with you more. I like to share my experience with people, trying to help people. I cannot count the number of times when people say, "But do you have a blueprint? Or can you tell me what to do?" I say, "No, I can't. I can guide you. I can give you a framework. I can give you tools that allow you to think. But at the end of the day, you have to choose what is right for you."
Mm-hmm. And if there was a blueprint, everybody would know it and everybody would follow it and everybody would be stinking rich.
Exactly.
It's not the way business works. I think a lot of times forecasting is just our best guess. And it can be useful for sure, but it's not set in stone because it hasn't happened yet. And none of us have crystal balls. At least I don't have a crystal ball.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep. And I know a lot of people that are saying that, or you have to build a business, or you have to build a lifestyle business. But you said every business is a lifestyle business. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of business people or people in the corporate world say, "Oh, well, if you're running a small business, it's a lifestyle business," and it's almost like it's a put down, I think. But I really feel that I want to run a business that supports my life and not a life that supports my business. And I want to run my business in a way that gives me the ability to do other things in my life. I don't want to live to work. And I also think that every single business is a lifestyle business. I think if you're a high growth tech company in Silicon Valley and you've taken a huge seed round or venture capital injection of cash, you are definitely going to have a very specific and prescribed lifestyle, because you are now working for two people. You're working for your customers to make sure that they're happy, and you're working for your investors to make sure they're happy. So your workload doubles, and you have to hope that what they need lines up the same. So I think that every business, if you work in the corporate world, you have to work 9 to 5, typically more. So every single business, you get a life that kind of comes with it. And for the businesses that I run and like to work on, I would rather have a business where it affords me the ability to have a life outside of that work. So if I want to go for a bike ride or a walk on Wednesday afternoon and I don't have any calls, I'm going to go do that. I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's not sunny very often. If the sun actually does come out, then I want to go spend a bit of time outside. And I don't want to feel bad that I'm not working, because I know I'm going to work at some other point. So
what is the typical week of Paul Jarvis in terms of when you wake up, what you do, what are your routines? How much do you work?
Yeah, I probably work about 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. And that is kind of that's where I feel like I'm at my most productive. I'm not trying to cram as much into every day as possible. I feel like we all have an amount of space that we can be productive, and then our productivity falls off a cliff and we end up on YouTube looking at cat videos. So I feel like 4 hours is the perfect amount for me to just heads down, focus on my work, and get the things done that I need to get done. I usually work 4 hours on the weekends too, just because that to me is just quiet, focused time. I'm not replying to emails. I'm not in our support channel answering customer questions. I'm just focused on a deep project where I can spend that time kind of in my own mind thinking through more complicated solutions. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that works. When I was in my 30s, I was probably working more. In my 20s, I was working a ton. So just where I am now and with the businesses that I have, I know that I can do about 4 hours a day, really, really focused, and then finish up and go do something else.
Do you have a morning routine?
Coffee. Then I tend to get into emails, mostly clear out support queues, go for a bike ride for a couple hours, get to work for a few more hours, make lunch with my wife, which usually takes about an hour because we make everything from scratch. Then usually work about an hour or two more, and then that's it. It changes because I have quite a few things going on, right? Like I run an analytics company called Fathom. I write books and articles. I host 3 podcasts, and I do a bunch of private investing and mentoring. So every day is very, very different. Some days I could just be writing all day. Some days I could be on the phone. Today's a phone day. So today all I'm doing is calls kind of thing. So every day is so different, but it's usually, 4 or 5 at the most hours broken up with a few very long breaks in between.
Do you work per objectives? Like, for instance, I have a bullet journal and every month, every week, every day, I'm not going to stop until that is done.
No, I don't really like that structure. I've tried it and I know it works for other people. For me, I tend to just think about, okay, what are like the 1 or 2 things I need to accomplish today? And then that's what I work on. As far as the business goes, the analytics company, we do have milestones we want to reach. We don't have dates assigned to any objective, milestone, or feature.
Okay.
We know that both of us and the contractors that we have work very hard and are going. We trust that each other is going to do the work. So we just work towards those goals and try to break those things up into manageable chunks so we can say this week we're working on dunning. So if somebody doesn't pay an invoice, then it automatically sends other invoices. And when does it lock the account? That's kind of what we're working on for the week. It might bleed over into next week. It probably won't because we're almost done. And my co-founder has a couple things to tie up, but that's kind of we usually have themes that we're working through each week, but it's not really time. It's very, very loose.
Got it. And are you leveraging also outsourcing other people to implement things that you want to delegate or don't want to do?
Yes. Taxes and legal, 100% delegated every single time. I don't want to touch my books. I'm really good at making money. I'm not good at telling the government how much I need to give them.
Got it.
That doesn't work for me. I also, because we deal with, for Fathom specifically, we deal with compliance, especially with European compliance law.
Oh,
that's really, GDPR, e-privacy, PECR, e-privacy directives. A lot of these things are very, very time consuming. I'm a writer and a designer and a marketer. My co-founder is a programmer. We can make best guesses for that, but we also need to ensure without a doubt that all of our customers, if we say we're GDPR compliant, then we 100% have to be, no question. Mm-hmm. So we have a privacy officer who's based in Norway, and we have a few lawyers based in Europe that we outsource to specifically for compliance to current and upcoming privacy laws. And that's a lot of work. And that's, to be honest, that's one of our biggest expenses right now. But we want to make sure that we do it and continue to do it properly. And then where we can, we try to also talk to governments, because governments don't always know how things work in the real world or how things work technically. So we've made one amendment to the California law for privacy, CPPA, with a bunch of other tech companies to make it more private. So we're happy to petition governments to get them to make the laws even better in terms of digital privacy. So we feel like that's a good thing to do for the internet.
We're going to come to that in a minute, for sure. Now, you're talking about Fathom Analytics, and I know with my accent I'm probably not pronouncing well. When did the idea for that came, and what are you trying to build with that?
Yeah, so the idea came, I think it was about 3 years ago now, where I was looking at Google Analytics. I was trying to find something in it, and I was clicking around for an hour, and I just felt there has to be a better way to do this. I only need this much data, a very small amount of data for my business from my analytics. And Google Analytics is thousands and thousands of pages of reports once you get into the weeds. So I sat down, because I'm a designer by trade. I sat down and I designed what I thought analytics should look like. I put it up on Twitter just thinking, oh, it'd be cool if this existed. Why doesn't this exist? And it caught on like wildfire. People were saying, well, why don't you build this? Like, how can I give you money for this product to be a real product? And so, so we built it, and we made it open source, so free in the beginning, and 1 million people downloaded it pretty quickly. But it required knowledge of how to install it on a server and maintain it and all of that. And normal people who aren't nerds couldn't have used it in that state. So we figured, okay, well, if we charge a fair price for it, we can manage it and host it ourselves. So all people need to do is install a little tracking code based as a snippet. And so we started to offer that for money, and people started signing up. People started using it. We now have everyone from governments to Premier League football teams using our software, because we're focused on the privacy side of things, but we're also focused on simplicity and giving people the data they need without having to click around. You don't have to get you can't get certified in Fathom. It's too easy. The certification would just be, hey, do you see the data? Yes, well, you're certified. So it's not complicated. It's as easy as possible, giving people the data that they need. And yeah, that's kind of how it started. In the beginning too, digital privacy wasn't something that people cared about. And it's funny that the day that we launched was the day that Mark Zuckerberg was testifying in front of American Congress on privacy, on privacy law things.
Yeah.
So I find we didn't time it that way. It just happened to be, hey, people are interested in this. This is something that's becoming part of the cultural zeitgeist. And it's something that normal folks who use the internet are really starting to care about. So that ended up that was pure and dumb luck that happened. But the ideas behind it were something that I've been thinking about for quite some time.
That's fascinating. And I think all my friends in the meetings and even industry, besides every single aspect, whether it's the content, the design, the infrastructure, the hotel, the transport, the production, and now we obviously have this privacy element for which we need to be aware of and know, maybe not to do it ourselves, but know where to go and why doing that. So I watched no later than last week with my family, The Social Dilemma on Netflix. And we were just like, I knew already, and I didn't like the fact that if you and I are speaking about Vancouver, suddenly I'm going to have ads for Vancouver popping up on my phone, which I hate. Mm-hmm. Not Vancouver, but the fact that it's popping on my phone. Yeah. And now, after watching The Social Dilemma, which I think everybody should be watching, I was like, oh my God, where do we go from that?
Yeah, there's so much information that all of these big tech companies have about all of us, right? And we didn't give them permission to take that. Mm-hmm. They just do. And they don't give us anything for it. This is personal information about ourselves. And it can be used for things like annoying advertising that follows you around the internet. Fathom doesn't do that. Fathom doesn't even work with saving data about a person from one site and bringing it to another. Fundamentally, that's not how it's built. But that kind of data can also be used for other things. It can influence voting. I mean, one of the most important things for the upcoming election in your country is social media. A lot of people go on Facebook and Twitter and all these platforms to learn about candidates, and if it's rife with misinformation, and if that misinformation can be targeted to people to reinforce beliefs or to change beliefs, and it's not accurate and is targeted, then that's dangerous to democracy.
Very.
Or if you live in a country where there aren't as many freedoms as we have in the West, then personal data can be used against somebody in terms of political dissent, in terms of if certain sexual orientation is made illegal in a country. All of these things that should be private information can be used against you, and it can result in death. So I think it's really important to think about, okay, well, what information can these big companies get from us and target us with, and what kind of things can we do to circumvent that, or to block it, or to obfuscate it, so they aren't able to get it, or it's very difficult to get it, or they don't get the right information, making it useless.
You said something that I remember watching the documentary. They said about what you're thinking, the behavior, and they say two things that I remember from that was frightening. So the first thing they said is the two only industries that are talking about customer by calling them users are the social media and the people selling drugs.
Yeah. And
the second thing they said is you and I as users, we're not the product. The product is to manage to change our behavior and to change our thinking. And that is very frightening.
It is. I mean, that's how social media is built. They use psychology to keep us refreshing and clicking and staying on the platform. And if you look at all these platforms, the way that they do that is by presenting us with information that we're going to emotionally react to. Whether or not that information is true or false or fake, it doesn't matter. If we react in some way that keeps us on the platform and keeps us clicking, and it keeps them learning more and more about us. And so that it's truly scary once you get into the weeds with all of that. And I think that, anybody that uses the internet should be concerned, or at least thinking about how they can protect themselves and protect the data that they have and protect the personal information that they put on the internet. Because I treat the internet, whether it's a Zoom call like this, whether it's a private email, anything that's on the internet could be made public. So is that something you would want to be made public?
And I would want to make this interview public for sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
No, but I get what you say. Absolutely. What do you think should be done? Because when they say they're going to self-regulate themselves, it's like bankers saying that they're going to self-regulate themselves with subprime. Come on, nobody believe it. So,
I mean, oil companies have also said they want to self-regulate.
Yeah, right. So what do you think should be done? And what is the framework that the future should bring with the social media companies?
Yeah, I think that there's several aspects to it. Obviously, I'm an advocate for smart privacy laws, and governments. I guess nowadays it seems like corporations have more power than governments.
Mm-hmm.
I think that governments can take that back because governments are just a collection of people. Governments are us. We put people in power to direct our will, but we the citizens of free countries can direct governments for change. So stronger privacy laws, and Europe is doing a great job of this, where there are definite laws, and these laws have teeth. The day that GDPR came into effect, there were lawsuits in the billions, right? And it wasn't just, what's his name, Max Schrems suing. It was a bunch of other people suing as well. So I think that's one aspect of it where there need to be real consequences for misusing our data. The next thing has to be consumer awareness. So if we're using these platforms, we need to be aware of why these platforms are trying to keep us on, and be aware of the fact that if we see something that's shocking that we want to share with all of our friends, let's act a bit like journalists and say, well, maybe I should fact check this a little bit. Maybe I should see if this fact exists somewhere else on the internet that isn't just Facebook and that isn't just like a conspiracy theory site.
Right.
Like maybe some news, it doesn't matter if it's left-leaning or right-leaning, maybe some news outlet has picked this up. And if they haven't, then maybe that's a red flag. The third thing is that we have to assume that if something is free and the company running it is making billions of dollars a quarter, and it's not actually free. There's money changing hands.
Right.
And if we're not giving them money, then they're making money off of us in another way. So I think with businesses like Fathom, our biggest competitor is Google Analytics, and Google Analytics is free. You don't have to pay a cent to use it, but it's run by the biggest advertising company in the world. So every time somebody buys and pays for my software, Fathom, they're saying that I would rather be in control of trading money for software, because our business model is that. Our business model is selling people software. It's not selling data about people using our software. Very different business models. So every time we get a new customer, we see, okay, this business model of not offering free software, but also not selling data is validated more and more and more. Yeah.
I agree with all the points you mentioned. With one little caveat, when you say that if it's not in the mainstream media, then maybe I should fact check it, and it's not true. I do have some examples, especially in Europe, where actually media don't want to speak about some topics, but in general, you're absolutely right. We tend to transfer and share immediately without fact checking. Although there is also some sarcastic sites that are putting, and I mean, that's their business. They announce it. They're putting fake news, but it's a joke.
Yeah.
And I personally love it. And I even love it more when people are sharing it and somebody goes, have you checked this? I say, no, I didn't check it because I know it's not true. It's a joke.
Yeah. It's an article on The Onion. Sometimes the Onion is a great website like that, yes, where everything it's just all wrong. But it's wrong in such a funny or interesting way that it seems like it could be right. Or sometimes we wish it works.
There's one in France called Le Gorafi, which is a play on words with Le Figaro, which is one of the newspaper. I've seen also The Onion. I've seen Babylon Bee. I mean, different ones, but yeah. So we're looking now, hopefully, at having a cure and a vaccine and going out of this. As you are a thinker and designer, and to me, you are the people that always see in advance where society is going. What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 years?
I think that it's going to be hard for people to feel normal. Even if things go back to normal, even if there's a vaccine and it's proven and it works, I would still feel uncomfortable in large groups of people in the beginning. I think, like, I just think about the last thing I did before in quarantine was go to a sports game where there was 65,000 people, right? I would feel very weird doing that right now, even though there really aren't any events with that many people. So I think that's going to be difficult. I think things like wearing masks is just becoming more and more commonplace to see that. And there's lots of places in Asia where masks have been just the norm for people for a really long time. So that could happen here. I think it's going to take time. I think it's going to be slow. I think we like to think that we can move quickly, and I don't think that is always the case. So I think that it is going to take a bit of time, or it is going to be somewhat a scaled back version, like big events, maybe small events happening several times. So you can run the same event, but with smaller groups of people. My wife is a distance runner. So they're looking at doing things with marathons where, okay, a small group of people starts, and then 20 minutes later, another small group of people starts, and then 20 minutes later, instead of having like thousands of people all at the start line, all running at the same time. So I think that there's alternate ways to do a lot of the things that we do. It's just a matter of coming up with, okay, does this work, and does this still feel like it's something that people are actually going to want to take part in?
Actually, the 5K online is my thing. I don't have to run. It's perfect. Paul, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much. How do people get in touch with you? How can they subscribe to your newsletter? Obviously, there's the book, Company of One, Why Staying Small is the Next Big Thing for Business, Paul Jarvis. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, the SundayDispatches.com is my newsletter. Fathom is usefathom.com. Those are the two main things. And yeah, if you hop on Amazon or to your local bookstore's website, you can find Company of One pretty much everywhere. I think it's translated into about 20 languages right now. So if English isn't your first language, you may be able to find it in the language that you're more comfortable with.
That's phenomenal. So again, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations for being such a thought leader. I know you don't want the names and everything, but I have to tell everybody's listening here, you should buy this book and you will be thinking differently after reading it. And you also have a great question, not a blueprint, but a great question to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric, for having me on the show today.
Thank you, Paul Jarvis, for being on the Business of Meetings. Fascinating discussion. Again, I love your book, The Company of One, and all the points you've made. And for those who haven't seen yet, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, that's the next thing you should be watching. Please join me in the Facebook group, www.evenbusinessformula.com/group, where we are talking and exchanging information about running your business. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you, and see you soon in the next episode.